Welcome, everyone, to the Next Best Picture podcast, where we are talking with Greg Kwedar, the director of Sing Sing. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be on here. Thanks for
I'm
having me.
My pleasure. I have been a huge fan of this film ever since seeing it at the Toronto Film Festival last fall at the premiere, and the feeling in that room after that movie was just unlike anything that I've experienced in a film in recent memory. And it's been so wonderful to see it rolling out to everyone and the larger audiences having the same reaction that we had there. It's been really wonderful. And I'm so thrilled for you and for the film's success so far.
Thank you
um,
so much. And I know you're being legit because I keep tabs on our movie out in the internet sphere, and your voice was like an early beacon that was showing all of us like, oh, like this is not just special to us, it's special to other people. And so thanks for joining that chorus with us.
Oh, you are most welcome. But talking about the actual making of the film, I had read that you first discovered the Rehabilitation Through the Arts, or RTA program, several years ago while working on a documentary in a max security prison in Kansas. So I'm curious, what exactly led you to this program? There are so many programs out there that are doing, interesting things with rehabilitation and things that are not outside of the norm, I guess, that we see from what we think of. So what led you to this program, and what led you to want to make a film centered around it?
I mean, it all went down that day that I was in that program, in that prison in Kansas, and that was 8 years ago. That's how long we've been working on this film. And that first day in Kansas, it was my first time ever behind the walls of a prison. And we were doing a doc about something else, but on a tour of the facility, I passed by a cell and there was a young man raising a rescue dog inside of a cell. And it just stopped me in my tracks because immediately in that moment, all my expectations of prison and incarcerated people were upended. And I was also like really frustrated because a lot of those expectations were propped up from the movies I'd grown up watching, my own industry. And yes, you could make a movie about that rescue dog program, and I love puppies, and so I would be appropriate to tell that story. But this question was forming in that moment that carried into the hotel room that night. Was just like, is there anyone else out there doing things differently? That was the question. And I typed that question directly into Google, and near the top of the search field was this program in New York, RTA, Rehabilitation Through the Arts. They've been around since 1996, and they were founded at Sing Sing. They'd done a lot of the classic plays from Shakespeare to A Few Good Men. They've been covered in a lot of the major press. It was a well reported, like everyone, like basically, you know, people felt the power and promise of what was happening. People wanted to write about it. People wanted to, like try and channel what was happening there, because what was happening there was very special. But there was this Esquire article about one of the only originals that had been put on at Sing Sing at the time for, 2 to 4 nights only, of a time traveling musical comedy called Breaking the Mummy's Code. And that's when I was like, this is it, why was that? I think it's because it was the tone of it all, the playfulness of this madcap, wacky production juxtaposed against the environment that it was set within felt like it sort of spoke almost like how I felt when I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for the first time, but also like Michel Gondry films. Like I was thinking, like Be Kind Rewind was a movie that also like kind of was operate like if those two like collided in this weird mashup, that was kind of like what the article was reading to me as. But it wasn't like real like whatever it takes, like I will give my life to make this movie. That came pretty soon after where you know, I that night I reached out to the journalist John Richardson who wrote the article, but also the real Brent Buell who wrote that play, Breaking the Mummy's Code. And very quickly he was just like, if you really want to know what this is like, you need to come to New York and you need to meet the men that lived it. I also want, and he was kind of like, I think he wanted the men to meet us and see if we, would pass muster and honor the beauty and truth of what was going on in this program. And it was like such a special community that they had formed that they were all very protective of, Brent very much so. And so my creative partner Clint and I, we flew up to New York and we went to breakfast at his apartment. And that morning, some of the men who star in this film and that it's the movie's about were in that room. The real Divine Eye, Clarence Macklin, who stars as himself in the film, he was the first man through the door. The real Divine G, who Coleman plays in the film, walked through that door all those years ago.
It's such a beautiful story of how it all came together. I really love it. And you mentioned, where that they had created this really special community there and they were all very protective of it. And you hear something like that and you think like, oh, well, a movie made out of that would obviously be an ensemble piece. And I was really interested to see that you had written a version of this that was more of an ensemble focus and then another one that was more focused on one like composite character before eventually landing on this story of two somewhat different men who become friends through the program. And I'm curious, what made this particular configuration of characters the best
Mm.
direction you thought for the project?
Clint and I, as storytellers, one of the things we always talk about is that the world and characters are sacred and the plot is fluid, and we're always in search of, what we call like a better arrow shot, that you can fire through that world that can, you know, honor the complexity and depth of that world, but it oftentimes, has to leave a lot of it behind in service of moving a narrative forward and telling a story. And and oftentimes we're reaching for things like a driving storyline that on the surface seems quite simple. But we like to say it's almost like simple, like the edge of a knife. It can cut quite deep and leave room for the thing that it's a story that we can wrap our minds around and that universally we can find our way to and understand. But the tricky thing that it's doing is that it allows for the infinite complexity of the characters to hopefully have space to be interrogated, and that's the thing that we're paying the closest attention to and trying to serve. And so in those early versions of the scripts, the more true ensemble was just like, you know, we were just consuming everything at the buffet, like in the buffet being like all of these men who went through this program, you could make a movie, a beautiful movie about every single one of them. So the early versions of the script, we tried to put all of that in there, and what was hard about that is it lacked someone to attach to as an audience to like help guide us and carry us through, this experience. And so then, yeah, we tried to then do that and create a single point of view, like very subjective journey outsider into the program. And that was too narrow because really it's a story of a community. And so a friendship really, again, seems like obvious or simple, but this real life friendship between Divine I and Divine G, what's so fascinating about it is they are two people, who could not have been more different from each other and, probably outside of this circumstance would not have found each other or become friends. but because of it and because of this gauntlet, shows that we can fit together in some of the most unlikely ways, and that's the power and beauty of the story. And via a friendship, you're kind of forging a community unto itself that then the real community of the program can sort of circle and dance alongside. And it just felt once you finally revealed itself, it was like, oh yeah, this is the only way.
And it's this beautiful way of how these artistic inspirations strike and how they reflect back, what the subject matter is. It's always fun when that happens, I think.
Mm.
Was it always part of your plan to cast alums of the program to play the characters in the film?
8 years ago at that first breakfast, we were aware of the talent in the room. I mean, notably, Clarence Divine Eye Macklin, when he walked in the door, he had the thing,
Yeah.
the star power, the magical fairy dust that we don't know how to describe what makes someone have it. We just know it when we see it. That was there. And and that was not just he was not just a diamond in the rough. I mean, the well of artistic power and talent and sort of wonderful vulnerability and in the group of alumni who have come through the program is just kind of omnipresent. And it was, so we knew it would figure into the movie, but that confidence in it becoming a cornerstone of what the whole movie is, grew with time. We didn't grow less confident as we progressed. We only grew more confident that this needed to be like the featured kind of core of the movie and its greatest strength. The thing that we're also like really excited about as filmmakers and really started to experiment with on my partner Clint's film that he directed, Jockey, was what happens with this alchemy of established actors coming into a space with people with real lived experience. And what's kind of like the overdrive of that idea is the people with lived experience also have tremendous acting backgrounds within this. It just happens to be within this exact environment that the movie is set within. And so there was a kind of transcendent quality of what happened when Coleman and Paul Racy and John San Jose enter a room as both a teacher and student with these alumni who brought the same thing. And um, and it was just one of the most beautiful gifts to be their first audience for it as a director and to be in the room for it when it happened.
Very, very cool. Um, you know, Working with so many formerly incarcerated people in the cast and shooting on location partially at the decommissioned downstate correctional facility, what was that mood like on set
Mhm.
for the cast, and how did you all work with that as the
Mhm.
crew?
It was something that we were the best word to describe is we were very aware and sensitive of what we were contemplating in terms of shooting this in a decommissioned facility. Now, what's unique about Downstate is that the entirety of our alumni cast have been incarcerated there at one point in their journeys. Clarence Macklin, there's a scene that he is in a cell that has been meticulously recreated to be like the cell that he would once occupied, that route to our production designer like built to spec from his own instructions was directly beneath the cell that he actually occupied when he was incarcerated there.
Wow.
And there's if we're going to present that juxtaposition of the liberating power of what this program meant for him and what the theater space unlocked, to then juxtapose that against the actual prison environment, we felt pretty certain that we needed to really demonstrate that, and that you couldn't build that on a backlot, you know, because there's an ineffable quality of the oppression of these spaces that you have to be inside the walls to really feel the miles of razor wire, the heat. Most prisons in America have no heating and air conditioning or ventilation. And the way that, it's not something a camera can capture, but it can capture how an actor feels when they're in that space. And the way that that heat just sits on your body like a weight, and the labyrinth of these places, like the way you go down one set of stairs and then you go up another, and then you're entirely turned around and lost, but also like just the ghosts in the walls. Um, and yet we knew as a community, not just filmmakers, but our cast, that we should travel in. But it was like, how do we care for ourselves and most notably our alumni when we do that? And there were the more obvious things, like having a therapist on set that had worked with many of the men when they were at Sing Sing, and so there was a relationship there and familiarity. But what was happening individually and in their shared sort of friendship and how they leaned on each other was the more profound protection, for everyone involved. Of, for example, putting on prison greens again. Almost every one of our alumni, when they walked out those gates, you know, was never going to come back inside and put those on again. And most don't wear green in any part of their wardrobe ever since. Like not in a pattern, not in a shirt or a sock, uh, not even on St. Patrick's Day.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and and so to put those back on was a big ask, one that we weren't as aware. Like, we knew the facility was going to cost something on everyone, but we didn't know that the wardrobe would. And Clarence, one thing he says is like, my body itched when I put them back on. Like, my body was rejecting this,
Oh,
you know.
wow.
But the thing that he kind of came to was like, the purpose was greater than the discomfort. The purpose of what we were trying to share was greater than discomfort. And also how, this is not a mandate, not a uniform that I'm told to wear, but this is now a costume to convey a character and a story. And that transition in the mind then became a powerful tool to express something.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I wanted to ask about a very specific quest choice that you guys made in the movie. And this is one that I did not realize at the premiere, but I realized at a second screening, is that when Divine Eye gets his packet at the end of the movie, it has Clarence's actual name on it. Where did you how did you decide where to draw the line between the fiction of the movie and the reality that these
Mm.
people lived?
It was a the script and the storytelling was never fixed. It was always alive and evolving and being shaped by the people that were making the film, the filmmakers and our cast, and so that exchange was always, you know, there was always space created to ask that exact question. You know, what is what should be brought into the room, and what should be left outside of it. Really is kind of a, if you were to broaden that, not just what is goes onto a uh onto that envelope, but that we were asking that with every decision that we were making end to end in the filmmaking process. And one of the things like, that we were also thinking about even in post was like, do you put ahead of as the film starting a card saying based on a true story? And it was one of those things where we were like, we really wrestled with that and we decided not to because we felt like it would limit what's actually happening here. It feels like it exists in a different plane, you know. And yes, you have the things that unfold in the movie, almost everything that unfolded in the movie happened. What there's dramatic license in terms of bringing things that happened outside of this production into the time frame of this production, and yet at the same time like allowing freedom for particular alumni, or just a question around names. We asked every one of our cast members, like, what name would you like to use? You could use your name, you could use an alias, one that maybe you used at one point in your life, or do you want to create a character or a name? And so that was a choice that everyone made themselves.
It's beautiful. And I like that how that all ties back to the collaborative process that kind of birthed Breaking the Mummy's Code, right?
Exactly. It all comes back to Mummy's Code. All
All
comes
comes
back to
back.
time travel, really. Uh,
I love it. I know we're coming up to the end of our time together and we're wrapping up. This movie is so much about the power of the arts to change your perspective, both on yourself and on the world outside of you. And for these men, creating theater, that was the avenue that helped with that. But I'm wondering how, for you, the exploring this through film may
hmm,
have changed your own perspective.
hmm. I'm still grappling with that. And
Mhm.
one thing that Coleman, when he came on to this film, he came on the first Zoom, and we were starting over with that new script, and we didn't even have a script. And he came on just through
Oh,
a conversation with
wow.
us.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, he was like, he heard the stories and the things that we were questioning and that we were curious about, and he felt the invitation to not just come as an actor, but come as all of himself as a storyteller and a filmmaker but more importantly as a person. And he was like, at this point in my career, I'm realizing that there are some projects that are seeking you to teach you something. You don't know what it is, you just know that it's trying to. And I'm saying yes to that at this point in my life. And I think I give that preamble to say I didn't realize that this film has been seeking me for 8 years to teach me something. And yes, there are many lessons that I could fill many more hours with you. And then also like things that are still like questions that haven't even been formed into words yet. You just feel them beyond you. And I think what I would say it's shaped me as an artist is I'm realizing I want to feel like those men felt when they were first making this play, all those years ago in 2005. It was like what I read in that article and then what I saw with my own eyes was it was a childlike joy in expressing themselves through art that is inside of all of us. But, I realize in doing this, I've been doing film since 2009. I've never had my heart broken by by making films or the art. I've had it broken by the business time and time and time again. But but coming back to like the creation and that feeling and doing it with people who care about you, um, is what I want to hold tight to and what I want to continue chasing.
That is really beautiful. And I would leave it there, except that you brought up, like the business side of film. And
Sure.
I know that you guys, you shop this around and tried to make it in the studio system, but it the suit said no. So what would be your advice to independent filmmakers who have an idea like this that has the potential to change lives and change perspectives, but they're hearing you will fund it if you have to compromise the vision in some
Mhm.
way?
Mm. You know, what's funny is that, we've made a lot of movies outside of the system, like truly independently. And um and there's a lot of power in that, and in the freedom that's afforded through, I think as filmmakers, you'll find yourself either at one point as the employee of your own ideas. You give literal ownership away of your own ideas to becoming the employer of your own ideas, and recognizing when you're in either one of those scenarios, what scenario you're really in, and adjusting your expectations accordingly. But what was beautiful about Sing Sing is, yeah, um, we really had our spirits crushed when we would expose this to the market, if you will, over the years, because they didn't see that magic, a little special corner that we felt the focus belonged in, and constantly tried to have it bend back to those conventions and those tropes and stereotypes. But uh but you only need one yes, and the right yes. And we happened to find an actual industry partner 4 weeks before we started shooting. Like, I had, with our producer Monique, landed on the ground in New York to start prep, and we were at that point, we had some development support early on, but at that point we were, basically surviving on my credit card up there. And like, spent a night at Brent Buell, like, he's taken so many people in who come home from prison. He took Monique and I in. We were at his cabin in
Oh,
upstate New York with his wife Janice, and I was like in the basement uh, of this cabin on a blow up mattress, surrounded by Mummy's Code costumes,
my gosh.
with this deflating mattress that would just like reinflate, as it would deflate. And I was like, what has my life come to? This is going to blow up in my face. But then we met the right match, but at the right moment, just kind of, this movie could have only, in hindsight, happened when it did. I wished it so many times, wished it could have happened earlier in those 8 years, but all of this wouldn't have aligned to be the film that is without it happening when it happened.
And it's here now, and it's really beautiful. Greg, thank you
Yeah.
so much for taking the time today, and thank you for the
Uh,
film.
hmm. Thank you. Thanks for the support. And this was a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.